On today's episode of What's Going On with Shipping, we do a follow-up on the collision between the coaster Verity and the bulker Polesie in the North Sea. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So, a lot of attention was drawn to this collision that took place up in the North Sea. The video I did on it was done within a day of the collision taking place. A lot of comments on it, both positive and negative, which happens with videos. I just want to state something very clearly. When I do a video on an accident, especially one that involves fatalities, as this one did, I don't do it lightly. And I do it because I really think, number one, that ocean shipping doesn't get any attention at all except when it comes to disasters. That's about the only time you ever hear about shipping. I like to do these videos because it highlights, number one, the danger that is involved in ocean shipping. This is a collision, and it does happen out at sea. It doesn't happen as often as it once used to, but it still does. And I think it's important that we look at this to make sure that the mariners who died, 5 of them in this case, didn't die in vain in many ways, that maybe a lesson can be derived from this accident that will prevent future collisions from happening. When I put a video like this together, it's not Sal just giving his own opinion about this. I talk to merchant mariners who are out there currently sailing. I was a licensed merchant mariner. I have my second mate's unlimited license. I have my limited master's license. But I go out and I pose this to mariners out there, master mariners, people who are currently sailing. What do you think of this situation? What did you derive from that? I also get a lot of feedback from people, and I appreciate the feedback. Not everyone agrees with me, because guess what? I ain't friggin' perfect. I make mistakes. I pronounced friggin' the port that Verity was going to as Iffingham as opposed to Himmingham. I apologize. I've been to Iffingham, and the names got stuck in my head, so I do make mistakes. But videos like this, I think, are important because it highlights, again, the danger that merchant mariners face on a daily basis, and it can prevent future accidents from happening. So we're going to take a look at this accident again in a little bit more detail, better graphics we're going to look at, and more importantly, a lot more information is out there and more opinions are coming out. And I will talk about the opinions I received that said, Sal, you're wrong. That's great. I'm going to tell you how people said I'm wrong, because I don't have a problem with that. And it's people who do have a problem with that I have problems with, because nobody's perfect on this planet. If you're new to the channel, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. So here's the story over in GCAPTAIN, the latest one from Bloomberg. Rescue called off for missing crew from UK flagged ship. So the Verity was the UK flagged vessel, a small little coaster vessel bringing steel up to Great Britain. The rescuers abandoned efforts to find 4 missing sailors a day after a British cargo ship sank in the North Sea. They did recover 2 survivors and 1, unfortunately, who did not survive. Due to the numerous operational resources, ships and helicopters in the area, it was possible to completely search the sea area in question again at night, says Germany's Central Committee for Maritime Emergencies. After this produced no results, the emergency services stopped the search. UK listed Verity and the much larger Polesie, a Bahamian-flagged cargo ship, a bulker, crashed in the early hours of Tuesday morning, October 24th. 2 of the Verity crews were rescued. A body of 1 sailor killed in the incident was retrieved from the water. All 22 crew of the Polesie were uninjured. So this is Verity, a very small coastal vessel built in Holland. Again, it was heading from Germany, from Bremen, up to Great Britain, less than 100 meters in length, less than 300 feet in length. And then you have Polesie, much larger bulker, built in China, substantially bigger vessel. And this collision took place in the middle of a traffic separation scheme where the Polesie's bow ran into the side, the starboard side, the right side of Verity, forcing Verity to sink and creating the incident that we are discussing today. All ships are governed by this. This is the International Maritime Organization. This is the UN shipping arm. Developed a convention on the international regulations for preventing collisions at sea in 1972, known as COLREGs. COLREGs are basically the rules of the road. If you're ever taking a course with the U.S. Coast Guard, you'll take rules of the road. Got my old rules of the road book here from when I was a cadet at State University of New York Maritime College. These are the rules that you follow. However, COLREGs are not written in stone. They are not foolproof. They give you basically rules you should follow, suggestions, everything, but there are eventually parameters that you have to take action for. And when you get yourself into a position of extremis, where a collision is imminent, you have to take action. And we're going to be referencing COLREGs. As we said, Rule 7 of COLREGs states this: every vessel shall use all available means appropriate to the prevailing circumstances and conditions to determine if risk of collisions exists. If there's any doubt such risk shall be deemed to exist, proper use shall be made of radar equipment, if fitted and operational, including long-range scanning to obtain early warning risk of collision, and radar plotting or equivalent systematic observations. Assumptions shall not be made on the basis of scanty information. And then all actions to be taken to avoid collision. This is Rule 8A. Any action taken to avoid collision shall, if the circumstances of the case admit, be positive, made in ample time, and with due regard to the observance of good seamanship. These are the rules under which ships operate when it comes to a condition of a collision. We're going to use MarineTraffic with their nautical chart option superimposed here, because I want you to see how this would have looked like to the crews on board the vessels. Because sometimes we take for granted that this is a very clean situation with nothing going on. This is a confusing area, a lot of traffic in and around the area. The two ships in question here are the Verity. Here's Verity right here, is coming out of the Weser River where Bremen is, down in Bremen. It is coming out through a very constrained channel. It's going to come out through this channel. Meanwhile, up here is Polesie. Polesie's coming out of Hamburg, out of the Elbe River, heading outbound. And you can see out here, just outside the Elbe, ships at anchor waiting to get in. If we zoom out here just a little bit, gives you an idea of the amount of traffic here. And one of the things you will also notice here are these purple areas. These are those traffic separation schemes. So traffic separation schemes are kind of like highways on the water. And you'll see there's lanes. You would stay to your right side going outbound. And that's what you see. The problem you have here is you have a traffic separation scheme that actually bisects this other traffic separation scheme. And it's right in the middle of this one where the collision will take place. Verity will be heading roughly northbound in a traffic separation scheme. Polesie is heading westbound in their traffic separation scheme. Now, traffic separation schemes are not highways with lanes and barriers on the side. You can maneuver in and around them. You can spin around to do other directions. However, according to COLREGs, you should try to follow a traffic separation scheme as closely as possible. So I'm going to zoom in here. Again, here you see Polesie outbound. Now, Polesie is going to be doing a couple of things to be watching for as we progress through here. Behind her is Iona. Iona is a big, huge passenger vessel coming out. These vessels will have pilots on board. And pilots mean that you have an expert mariner on board to help you navigate through some narrow channels. That's not going to be an issue in this collision, because what you'll see here as Iona and Polesie come up to the pilot station, you'll see some small little light blue boats come alongside. That's the pilots getting off. Verity does not have a pilot. However, one of the things you will see is Verity is going to be passed by lots of ships. Not a very fast vessel, Verity. It's doing about 7.5 knots. So I'm going to go ahead and let this play. It's at an accelerated rate here. And you're going to start seeing the traffic. I'm going to zoom in here just a little bit for you so you can see it. And what you're seeing here now is that taking place. So here is Polesie. You'll see a pilot boat coming alongside. Iona is right here. It's going to get a pilot boat coming alongside. And here's Verity just coming out now, heading out through the Weser and Jade area pilot station. You'll see buoys in place here, and then a couple of big marker buoys right here. These marker buoys are basically delineating where the traffic lane is. Most ships will use an electronic charting system, which will have all this on here. You'll get fed data from your GPS so that you're seeing something kind of similar to this, but not exactly. AIS, you always have to be careful for, because while this looks very sophisticated, very accurate, there could be distortions in AIS. So even though what we're watching here seems like live real-time data, we can get some disruptions. So notice up here, Polesie is pulled off kind of to the north side of the lane, Iona on the south side. That's because they're dumping their pilots at that moment. Here's the Elbe pilot station, or Elbe where they would normally pick up the pilots. These are ships anchored here waiting to get in. There are more ships anchored waiting to get in here, and ships anchored here waiting to get in. And of course, you have a lot of traffic in the area. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the speed markers here so you can see speed too. Verity here is doing about 9 knots. Polesie is doing about 11.4 knots. And go ahead and let that play. You'll see the vessels now begin their tracks as they're going. So here is Polesie, 11.1 knots. Go ahead and put track lines on so you can see what track they're on. Here is Verity at the very bottom just coming. So Verity just turned right, and now it is coming up into the middle of their lane, and they're going to be heading in the middle of their lane. Now, I had a pilot, an instructor who was teaching rules of the road say to me that this looks a lot like an overtaking situation. Overtaking where basically Verity is being overtaken by Polesie. If you go back here just a second, I'm going to go ahead and reverse this for just a second here and take you back here. We're going to go ahead and back everything up. So Verity is heading on a course of just above westerly. Polesie is also on a westerly course. And it looks like that Polesie is overtaking Verity. Now, in an overtaking situation, the ship that is doing the overtaking, in this case Polesie is catching up on the Verity. Polesie would have to give way. And I disagree with this. I don't think this is an overtaking situation. I think this lines up like an overtaking situation just because Verity is in this channel right here. But once it turns into the traffic separation scheme, it's going to become a crossing situation. And I don't think there's any way with the amount of traffic here that Polesie is looking at Verity as a potential overtaking vessel at this point. I just don't see it happening at this point. Go ahead and let this play. So now Verity is heading up, and here's Polesie heading up. Now notice a couple of things. We're going to zoom in here again a little bit more. Polesie is heading for this buoy. It has Iona off its port quarter, and you'll notice here Iona and Polesie are roughly about the same speed. Polesie is just a little bit faster here. And here's Verity about 8.3 knots heading up into the lane. Meanwhile, Polesie is going to be coming. It's going to round this buoy and then take its course change. Lots of times, these courses are locked in, programmed into electronic navigation systems, and ships will follow their track lines. They run almost the same tracks sometimes. And ships will really kind of follow along with those tracks. And that seems to be the case that we're going to see here. I'm going to let this run a little bit more here. Now notice both these ships are heading into a situation here where Verity is coming up, Polesie's coming up. At this point, there's a situation. You have constant bearing at this time. In other words, Verity and Polesie are at the same bearing from each other. Now this is night, so you're not seeing the vessels, you're seeing lights. What you'd be seeing on the Polesie is a pair of white lights, one lower than the other. The one lower is up forward, the one higher is back aft, and then you'd be seeing a red running light. The red running light tells you you are forward of an overtaking position. Verity would show the same lights, except it wouldn't have a red light, it would have a green light. And in many ways, that red light's the stoplight for this situation because Polesie, if Verity sees that, it should change speed. Now, talking to people who have been involved in this type of trade will tell me that Verity, being a small coastal vessel, will take very small, what are called CPAs, closest points of approach. Lots of times you want to have a nice big CPA, 2-3 miles, but in confined waters, you'll have smaller ones, and smaller vessels tend to take smaller CPAs. And at this point, it's not clear if you actually have a collision yet. It may be based on Polesie's course here that Verity will pass just astern of it. Based on this, there may be a little bit of movement here where Polesie's coming up. Verity can take a short little turn here and just come astern of Polesie. As long as Polesie remains on that course, I think Verity wants to make a turn to starboard, just a little bit of a turn to starboard, cut between Polesie and Iona here, get out of the situation they are in. I'm going to come a little bit closer here now so that we can see this and go ahead and slow this down so you can watch it play out a little more. So here they are moving, and this is where you see the first problem happen. Again, you're at constant bearing at this point. Your bearing is still fairly constant. Your range is decreasing. And so you're seeing this area really starting to close. This is a crossing situation. Verity has to give way for Polesie. That's the rules. The rules is Verity has to do it, and Verity can do it in a couple of ways. They could have slowed down. They could have slowed down, waited for ships to cross. Verity could come hard right here and go down the port side of both Iona and Polesie at this point. If you zoom out here at the moment, there's no traffic coming in behind Iona and Polesie. Actually, Verity could have crossed through this area here, go around this buoy, and then swing back behind and come back in. But ships don't like maneuvering. They just don't, because it gets them off their schedule. And now you see a very kind of precarious position here that these two ships are in. So now you have a course change. Polesie has turned to port. Now, again, I think this isn't... I initially thought this was Polesie maneuvering to go around Verity, but now I think it's on its track line to make a programmed turn so that it can continue down this entire vessel traffic separation scheme. You see it right here. It's right in the middle of the lane. It's made its turn down the lane. The other thing is you have traffic coming through here. Notice over here, two traffic vessels coming in, Eagle Balder here and the Seagas Monarch. It has to come in behind those vessels. So it's made its turn now. It's going to come in. And this is what I mean. This is a dynamic element here. You have multiple ships coming in. We have 5 ships involved. Iona, large passenger vessel. Polesie, the bulker. Eagle Balder coming southbound. And now this ship, the Seagas Monarch. And Verity finds itself right in between 4 vessels. A very difficult position to be in. And what happens now is you really need for some sort of action to take place. I'm going to slow it down here a little bit and let it go. So Verity has turned now. Verity has turned due north. And it looks like Verity turned due north right after Polesie turned. And this has put them, again, on a collision course at this moment. Now, if Polesie had stayed going due west, Verity may have came just behind Polesie, may have just been able to avoid it. But it looks like Polesie has turned to get into that traffic separation scheme. What is going to be necessary is a review of the vessel data recorder. Vessel data recorders are black boxes on ships. Polesie will have one. It will record not just speed and movement of the vessel, but also bridge conversation. So if there's a conversation on the bridge about what's going on here, we'll be able to get that. Plus, we would want to get the interview with the mate, the officer in charge, the helmsman at the time, to see what's going on. You'd want the same thing from Iona and these other vessels to see if they notice what's going on. Now you see the vessels coming in. Speed is still holding. Verity is heading north. Polesie is now turning again. There's a slight change again in its track line, and Verity is going to veer hard left. Both vessels seem to turn. Verity to the left, Polesie to the right. If Polesie had stayed with that left turn, it would have potentially passed south of them. The problem is Polesie's a big honking bulker. It doesn't maneuver very well. When you turn the wheel of a ship, it doesn't always turn immediately. And it looks like Polesie is making a hard decision to come that way. Now, Polesie could have just turned hard right the whole time, spun a big circle here, come back around, and gotten back on track. It could have come left, communicated with Iona, we're cutting across your bow to avoid traffic. The problem it has, too, is it's got to make sure it's clear of this traffic coming in. But at this moment, with the two vessels maneuvering, and remember, going back to the rules of the road, you have to make clear, concise movements that are clear to understand. That doesn't seem to be happening here. And it's at that moment you have the collision. Verity's AIS tracker stops tracking at this point. And what you notice here is both Polesie and Iona sheer out of position at this moment. There was a question about what happened afterwards. And I think it's very clear that rescue operations were initiated almost immediately. Here you see Atlantic Sun outbound. It's going to avoid this position. Both Polesie and Iona are going to initiate rescue operations. Matter of fact, we will see from Iona its rib boats hitting the water. They have AIS transponders on board. Polesie goes back over the position. You're seeing small vessels running in here, Nordic, Herman Marweed coming in, small vessels. You'll see a ton of them coming in at this time. Pilot boat coming in. Again, you see Iona's rib being launched here. We know Iona rescues, actually retrieves the body of the one other person from Verity from the ship. And then you just see all these vessels in position. Polesie is sitting here. Iona is sitting here, and more rescue vessels coming in to work the area. Obviously, a lot happening here. Do we know what happened for sure? No, we don't. What I just showed you is what we get from an AIS recording. It is by no means the definitive nature. However, clear movement coming into a traffic separation scheme is required. I talked about using the VHF radio. I got a lot of flack for that. People say you don't get on the radio, it's just going to cause more confusion. Well, that's true, but you had a collision here. So I think at times communication is not a bad thing. Unfortunately, this incident led to the loss of 5 people. And I think we need to remember that so that this doesn't happen in the future. Traffic separation schemes are great. They help prevent collisions. But as you see, when you have a crossing situation within a traffic separation scheme, it can be fatal. And you need to take due measures for this. Just because you're a large vessel or a small vessel, you have to give way. I have friends who sail every day. I have friends who are pilots. We'll talk about how they are in continually close situations regarding collisions on a daily basis. The amount of times where we have close calls. I did a whole video on 2 ships coming out of San Diego Bay not too long ago, the Momsen and the Harper's Ferry, where we saw a close cut situation. Got a lot of flack for that video too from the Navy and from other people, but I think it's important to highlight what to do when these situations happen. A lot of people do this for road, rail, aviation, and I think it's important because it helps you understand how ocean shipping is operating. All right, with that video, this is Sal signing off.